Welcome back to Dowsecting the Week. We're back in front of the whiteboard. We are back at home. The topic I wanted to start with today was winning without pressure, because this Tour de France there's both. Pogacar's won with the pressure and expectation of being defending champion, but then on the other hand you've got Vingegaard. He didn't win, but you'd call it a win, what he did. And Cavendish and Ben O'Connor, who were riders that didn't really have any pressure on them to win, but came away with wins. Like Cavendish wasn't even meant to be in the race up until a week before. 4-stage wins in the green jersey. Ben O'Connor, it's his first Tour de France, and just went for it and won. And I think that whole psychology of some people really thrive under that pressure, arguably Pogacar, but then some people, you take the pressure away and then they really shine, and it's something you see with riders. Often riders will do better outside of contract year than they will do inside of contract year, because there is that element of a bit less pressure if you know you've got a job through to the next year. So, and I think the Tour de France really showed us the two sides of that pressure to winning aspect. So yeah, that's my little takeaway.
Are you a rider that cracks under pressure or a diamond?
I don't know what kind of, the Giro last year, there was pressure to get a contract, but I never had a stage win in my head. It was never like, I really need a stage win, because I generally resign myself to the fact that I don't win road races. I win TTs, on seldom occasion. But yeah, it was nice. Well, we're not here to talk about me. Start off with Heroes of the Week. Not so many this time, and controversially Cavendish doesn't really, he almost featured for winning the green jersey, but he's been here a lot. I think it's time to have a bit of a Cavendish break, although we will get on to Cavendish. He's not in the Heroes of the Week this week. Firstly, the heroes are everyone that finished the Tour, because I think it was a pretty brutal one this year. Reasons for that were obviously the crashes early on, just the sheer pace. I think this year was tough, and perhaps not the pace, perhaps that the gruppetto didn't seem as cohesive this year as it has done, and maybe that's a sign of cycling changing, in that everyone, instead of people treating it like a Grand Tour, and I know when I started Grand Tours, my advice was if you're not going to compete in the day, get yourself into the last gruppetto and get it in as easy as possible. Now everyone seems to be racing no matter where they are, so you had the gruppetto with Quickstep, who were doing a traditional thing to keep Cavendish as safe and as well rested as possible, but then you just had riders dotted in between them and the front, which it doesn't make a lot of sense, because if you're fighting for 80th, it's not really, it doesn't really count for much. But if you can knock the pace back a bit and save 5 or 10% energy coming into the next days, then that to me makes more sense, and that wasn't something that seemed to be happening this year's Tour. Regardless, it was tough. There was a lot of people that didn't finish. There's a lot of big names that didn't finish, but hats off to Fred Wright, Right Said Fred, who is the youngest rider in the race and did get through it, and also did a sterling job for Bahrain Victorious in a lot of the lead-outs. Wout van Aert, good, was touch and go going to win it. He won on the Champs-Elysees the day after winning a TT, and a few days after winning Mont Ventoux. In modern day cycling, I'm not sure there's a rider that is as versatile as Wout van Aert, and that's not including the domestic work he did for Vingegaard as well, which we talked about last week. So he is big. Andre Grapple, he announced that he is retiring at the end of the year. I've had the pleasure of being a lead-out man for Andre, and he's a lot of fun. If he wins or doesn't win, he'll buy you a beer and say thank you, which there's quite a few sprinters that won't do that. It doesn't matter if you drop them off perfectly and they don't win, it will still be the lead-out train's fault. Andre is one of those guys that goes, nah, that was on me, and buys everyone a beer. Absolute legend of the sport. I believe the most winningest rider of modern day cycling, or perhaps all time. His last Tour, finished 5th on the Champs-Elysees, which is bloody respectable, and he's hanging out the wheels at the end of the year. The last two, maybe a combined winner of Hero of the Week, is the UAE team Pogacar. UAE team, because they did deliver Tele perfectly all the time. Sometimes they had some help from Ineos's sort of tactics of trying to win, where Ineos would just set the pace that I think UAE would have set, so they could sort of take a back seat. But you had like Formula and Rafa Michael like well deep into mountain stages, looking after Pogacar, and I guess they were lucky because unlike a lot of GC guys, Pogacar likes to go from a long way out, which makes their job a little bit not easier, but just less long. Yeah, they did a sterling job, and the kit that they wore on the Champs-Elysees was a real nice touch as well. And Tadej Pogacar, like last year, he wouldn't have called. No, I don't think many people were tipping him for a win, possibly the white jersey, and then he just came in that team, monstered that TT and won it at the end. This year had to defend from the start, but he done all his damage in the first week and then just chipped away at it, and then at the end showed that he still had what it takes. Obviously Vingegaard showed a bit of weakness on Mont Ventoux. Oh, Christ, Pogacar he was dominant the whole time. And some people have said it's boring. I respectfully disagree. I think it was wonderful to watch like the new kid on the block and the new kid on the block be such a talent. And I think we're into an era of these youngsters. Pogacar will come away looking at Vingegaard. I'm sure at some point the stars will align and you'll have a Roglic, a Bernal, Vingegaard and Pogacar and Remco and whoever's next coming up onto the same start line in the Tour and managing to get through that first week unscathed and then going head to head in the mountains, and I think that would be exciting. So, but Pogacar wins Hero of the Week, and I think no one can argue that. We're going to WTF of the week. Put Wout van Aert in there just because he did win a mountain, a TT, and the sprinters of sprint stages whilst being a superb domestic, and yeah, that is like, it's mind-blowing to the point where it's like a WTF. And I don't mean anything sinister by that, he is phenomenal, and that's why he's here, because it's like a mind-blowing emoji would be all over. If I could put emojis on this whiteboard.
It's called editing.
We'll do that in the edit. There'll be a mind-blowing emoji. Cavendish and Vingegaard, because they were never meant to be in the Tour de France. Cavendish being a super late caller after Bennett's injuries, and Vingegaard being the replacement for Tom Dumoulin, who took a bit of a time out from cycling, and arguably been two of the biggest stories from this year's Tour de France. And the last WTF is the police and Bahrain team incident, where the Bahrain team got raided by the police, and no one knows the real backstory, no one knows where it came from, no one knows why they were raided, there was allegations, and going back to what I said before about Pogacar having to answer questions about doping, is we do have a system in place, and that system's there to catch people who are cheating. And I think if the police are going to raid one team, they should raid all the teams, because that subsequently makes it quite unfair in terms of recovery. I mean, riders had their laptops and phones taken away from them and are told they're going to see them in a month or two, which just to have that in the middle of a sporting event as big as the Tour de France, I can't imagine what that did for riders, like mental health and riders, just their recovery and well-being. I mean, going back to Fred, it's his first Tour de France and he's had to endure that. I've never had to endure anything like that throughout my sort of 10-12 year career. So, upcoming, we're back into racing. We finished Sardinia, which Diego Ulissi won. Next up is the Belgian, big race for the Belgian Tour, Wallonie. I think people outside of Belgium are not too excited about Wallonie, but people inside Belgium are very excited about Wallonie. So that's happening, and the Olympic road race as well is coming up, which my money was on Pogacar, but I think perhaps Wout van Aert could even do the double with the TT and the road race. I don't think they can drop him on the climb, and you wouldn't bet against him in a sprint against, well, anyone really. So my money's on Wout van Aert to win the road race, and I don't know who's going to win Wallonie because I don't actually know who is on the start list for it. Thanks for watching. See you next week.